Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me again, Brittany.
In the 2 weeks since President-elect Donald Trump won the election, he has been busy assembling his new administration. He's nominated some of your colleagues from the House, former Democrats, as well as some Fox News hosts. Before we dive into specifics, what are your overarching thoughts on the new cabinet picks?
Well, my overarching thoughts is that Donald Trump is trying to break the U.S. government and make it bend to his will by assembling what is essentially a chaos cabinet. He's quite literally putting together what I would describe as a Star Wars cantina of people who are not qualified or would be dangerous to our national security. Now, look, I mean, when you win the presidency, you obviously have the right to nominate who you wish to serve the American people. But and that would be people like Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz, for example, for Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, neither of whom I agree with on very much, but who are certainly qualified for those roles. But when you have someone like Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has actually recently suggested that he would freeze cancer research, as a breast cancer survivor and as someone who's lost other members of my family to cancer, that sends chills up my spine and should do the same for people across America, not the least of which is also because he's an anti-vaxxer, and there's a lot of people who would be in harm's way. We've already had measles outbreaks in Florida, thanks to our anti-vax Surgeon General in Florida. So there's a lot of cause for concern.
There are a few Floridians that have been nominated for the cabinet. So as a Florida Democrat yourself, I would love to get your reaction on some of them. So let's start with arguably the most controversial, former Congressman Matt Gaetz. He was nominated for Attorney General. He resigned from the position, or resigned from his position in the House shortly after Trump made the announcement and days before the House Ethics Committee was going to release a report on sexual misconduct and drug allegations against him. What are your thoughts on Gaetz's nomination?
I mean, at the very basic level with Matt Gaetz, he's just not qualified to be in charge of our entire system of justice. This is someone who has nearly zero experience in practicing law, has never worked at the Department of Justice, has no experience with running any large organization, and certainly has a very troubling situation in which he has been accused of trafficking, sex trafficking minors, and that could not possibly be the best person that Donald Trump could nominate to lead our Department of Justice.
He's denied the allegations, but what on a personal level is it like working with him?
I mean, I have been able to work with Matt Gaetz, like other members of the Florida delegation, on issues that are important to our state. That's in a way besides the point, because Donald Trump's intention in nominating Matt Gaetz to be the Attorney General is to break the Department of Justice, is to bend it to his will, is to eliminate the independence of the legal system from the presidency, and be able to shield him from it and shield others for whom he wants to protect. But it goes so much deeper than Matt Gaetz. I mean, now you have Linda McMahon, who was nominated to be the Secretary of Education, who also has a cloud of scandal and controversy, where she has now been sued for looking away from child sexual abuse that was going on, apparently, when she was in charge of the WWE. This is a woman who is being tasked with responsibility for taking care of all of the education of our nation's children. On top of that, Donald Trump wants to eliminate the department that he's nominated her to lead. And it's also someone who once lied about having an education degree. You see the thread that's running through these nominations here? People who are unqualified, who are dangerous and would actually do damage to the well-being of people whose responsibility that would be in their care.
two other Floridians that you said, hey, I don't agree with them about much, but I think that they are qualified for the role, are Senator Marco Rubio for Secretary of State and Florida Republican Mike Waltz for National Security Advisor. Can you talk to us a little bit about working with them? What's your insight there?
Well, Congressman Waltz and I just passed the Bolivar Act just a couple of days ago, which is legislation that's critical to making sure that the Venezuelan people are able to ensure that Maduro, who has illegally remained in office and is running an authoritarian, autocratic regime where he has essentially starved his own people for his own enrichment, the Bolivar Act would make sure that Maduro can no longer benefit from oil sales from the United States, and would once again prohibit those contracts and leases. So that's an example where he and I have been able to work together. Senator Rubio and I have worked together to fight for freedom for the people in Cuba, on protection of the Everglades alongside Congressman Waltz, and making sure that we can really go to bat for resources for our state. So those are things that we can find common ground on. And again, like I said, they are well qualified for their roles, even though I don't agree with them on the majority of the issues. But the collection of chaos agents that he has assembled for nearly all of the rest of his cabinet is truly shocking. I mean, Dr. Oz, who is has embraced quack science and would be responsible. I mean, I'm a Floridian. We have the largest percentage of seniors of any state, and the most significant number that are reliant on Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid. And the person that he's nominated to be in charge of Medicare and Medicaid is someone who really has a quackery as his priority for taking care of people's health. He needs a serious vetting by the United States Senate.
Before we get to the other cabinet nominees, I do want to go back to Senator Marco Rubio. He does have the support of at least one other Democrat. So let's say he does get confirmed. Who should Governor DeSantis select to fill the role? One of the names that has been floated is RNC co-chair Laura Trump. What do you think about that?
And I don't think that Laura Trump would be an appropriate choice for the United States Senate. She's not even from Florida. I mean, she's lived in Florida like 5 minutes, and the Senate, the United States Senate seat that represents Florida, we're the third largest state in the country, one of the most significant states economically, the gateway to Latin America. To have someone who has hardly any real personal ties to our state would be disrespectful of the people of Florida.
You said that the cabinet overall is full of chaos agents if they are confirmed. I know Democrats have been raising the alarm bells here on this cabinet. Republicans say, hey, this is what the voters want. This is the Republicans won the popular vote, also won the Electoral College. So what do you think, based on this cabinet, the next 4 years are going to look like?
Well, let's be very clear that Donald Trump is likely to end up with one of the smallest majorities of any presidential candidate in history, to say nothing of the fact that this was not a red wave or a Republican wave. Donald Trump won the battleground states. About 240,000 votes separate 1.5% the two candidates. And if you look at the results beyond the presidential campaign, every single Democratic candidate for United States Senate, either incumbent or an open seat, and Pennsylvania is still out there, 4 out of 5, the Democratic candidate, the Democratic senator, was reelected. Republicans will have an even smaller majority. It was only 4 seats to begin with. In the next Congress, we actually beat more of their incumbents than they beat of ours. And I mean, it's going to be a hair's breadth of a majority for the Republicans. So this isn't a mandate for the Republican Party. Donald Trump certainly has the right to nominate who he chooses, but that's why there is a United States Senate requirement for them to advise and consent, and they need to do a healthy review of all of these nominees, because they, as a whole, will jeopardize our national security and put people's lives and health in danger if they are confirmed.
Congresswoman, before I let you go, I do want to talk about some news from the House. Earlier this week, your colleague, Congresswoman Nancy Mace, introduced a controversial new resolution that would prohibit, quote, members, officers, and employees of the House from using single-sex facilities other than those corresponding to their biological sex. And this comes after Sarah McBride became the first openly transgender person to be elected to Congress. Yesterday, Speaker Mike Johnson announced a new rule that would prohibit McBride from using women's restrooms on the Capitol. What are your thoughts on this situation?
My thoughts are that it is astonishing that this is the top priority of the Republican Party going into the next Congress. Sarah McBride is a Delaware state senator. Delaware, people should know, has one member of Congress, and her state sent her to represent them in the United States Capitol. And I know she's going to do a fantastic job because of the work that she did in the state Senate. She sponsored family medical leave successfully, that is now law in Delaware, and has a really incredible record. And she's going to focus on the kitchen table issues that Delawareans care about. Not on where she or anyone else uses the restroom. And it was embarrassing. I'm embarrassed for and appalled for the Republican leadership that this is something that they actually prioritized instead of trying to make sure that we can get down to business to take care of the American people and pass a budget that they still haven't been able to do, particularly without our help. And we've got to get down to work to do the work of the American people.
Well, Congresswoman, I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for joining me.